Welcome to another tutorial.
In this assignment, we are going to be creating something more organic, based on this little ice cream lady. The same warning as in the other tutorial, as we get deeper into tutorials, I will stop calling out the transform tools, since you should know that if I move an object, it's with the move tool, if I scale an object, it's with the scale tool, if I rotate an object, it's with the rotate tool,
And if I need to select something, it's with the brush selection.
Alright, let's jump into it. First, we are going to create the cup where this ice cream will live. So bring in the reference image and increase the transparency so that you can see your spline. As a reminder, go to Mode, View Settings, and the Back tab. Trace around it with your pen tool. First point at 0 and make sure to add an inner spline. However, for this inner spline, we do not need to go all the way down to the bottom. We're going to stop right here and then connect it with a straight line to the bottom. Both of these points should be at 0 so that there's no hole or overlap in geometry. Make sure to fix your points if you need to. Make the spline a child of the lathe and smooth it out if you need to, which I needed to.
I am using the Spline Smooth tool with various strengths so that I can smooth out the spline that makes up the cup.
Now, let's make the beginning of the ice cream by making a part inside of the cup first.
Before anything, make sure that you name your lathe cup and then deactivate the lathe so that we can work on the spline itself.
We're going to use the already made spline to make this easier for us. Select all of the points from the inner part of your spline and right-click on your viewport.
Here, we want to find the split function, and instead of just clicking split, we want to click on the cogwheel that is next to split. This will give us an option window where we can tell the split function to keep a copy of our original spline. So what the split function does is that it creates a copy of our spline, and it can either disconnect it from our original spline or simply make a copy of it. Once you get the copy, so now you have spline and spline point 1, take it out of the cup and bring it to the upmost object manager layer. Rename it ice cream, and by default this comes out as a closed spline, which eventually is what we want, but right now let's uncheck closed spline.
Switching to the front view and using our pen tool, let's close the spline by making a point near the y-axis and connecting it to the bottom.
Just as a reminder that you have to hold shift to disconnect your tangents. Make sure that these points in the center are also zeroed out in X, and then make this spline a child of a lathe.
So this is the base of our ice cream, but what I want is to create kind of like a comfy bed that will merge with the rest of the ice cream. So first, let's double click on this top point to change it from hard interpolation to soft interpolation and be able to alter the tangents. Let's increase the curvature at the top. Next, let's do something similar to this point on the side so that it looks like the ice cream is overflowing a little bit.
If your cup lathe is still deactivated, this is a good time to activate it.
Make sure that the bottom tangent is not making the ice cream come out from the side of the cup. And don't forget to name everything accordingly. That little dent on the inside does not matter too much in this case, since we won't be able to see it once we actually put the ice cream on top, but be aware that that is happening, and if you were going to see it, we would need to fix it. Alright, so now let's make the ice cream. We will do this with a helix and change it to the correct plane, which is XC. So now we're going to make a bunch of edits to this helix. We want first the top to be smaller, so let's change the end radius to make it smaller and the start radius to make it bigger. We want a lot more swirls, so let's increase the end angle. I ended up with 3000, but you can have as many as you want. Now, I want the ice cream to be bottom heavy, so we're going to change the radial bias and the height bias. The radial bias defines the speed of the horizontal growth, while the height bias determines the vertical growth. You can also change the height. We will need to further edit them later on, so none of these numbers are final. Now let's give this swirl some geometry by getting a contour spline. I will be using the flower and making both of them children of the sweep. So that's a lot of ice cream. We definitely need to make our contours smaller. Play around with how your flower looks until you get something that you are happy with. I ultimately ended up with 25 centimeters for the inner radius and 50 centimeters for the outer radius. Make sure to move and scale your ice cream according to how you want it to look. I am reducing the end scale of the sweep so that not only is the top of the helix smaller, but the geometry of the whole swirl is smaller on the top.
For me, the end scale was 65%, but your ice cream might be different, so play around with it so that the top is smaller than the bottom, but you also don't want the top to be fully separated from each other.
Now, a few more adjustments to the helix. This is going to take a bit of playing around with from your part, so make sure to spend time to get something that you're actually happy with. Now let's bring out the star of the show, the volume builder, and bring in our ice cream and our ice cream base to be children of the volume builder. Let's reduce the voxel size because while we want this to be soft, we don't want it to lose all definition. Now let's add a tip to this ice cream. Instead of editing the helix more, let's add a new spline that's just going to be the tip. So, a reminder, deactivate your volume builder so that you can see the geometry in the front view, and with your pen tool, add a little curved tip to this ice cream. Instead of having to figure out a new contour spline, let's just copy the sweep, the one that we made for the ice cream, and replace the helix path with our new tip spline. And now we have similar geometry to the rest of the ice cream without having to do too much work. But of course, we still need to edit it. I brought the scale back to default, which is 100%. I'll change it afterwards again, but this makes it easier to visualize how big the tip is if it's not being affected by the end scale. Now, I can see that the flower contour is too big, so with our scale tool, let's scale it and position the individual points to better connect with our ice cream. We don't need this to be perfect since the volume builder will smooth it all out and connect it. But we do need to get close enough. Now we can change the end scale again because, like I said, this is going to be the tip of the swirl, so it should look like one. Let's further adjust this to something that you feel matches your swirl. I can't give you exact numbers because you may have done something different with the helix, you may have done something different with your flower, so just do something that you like and feel like it looks connected enough. Again, it does not have to match exactly how your ice cream is. Alright, now let's name this tip and bring it into the volume builder. To connect those two splines and smooth them out, let's add an SDF smooth filter, and we got some soft serve. Next thing is to add a little bit more irregularity to this ice cream because right now it looks too perfect. So I'm going to take out a flower spline, put it in the correct plane, XZ, and fit it around the bottom of the ice cream. We will alter the way that this flower looks later on, so the numbers don't matter too much right now. Let's use the same time-saving technique as with the tip, which was to copy the ice cream sweep and change the path spline from the helix to, in this case, our flower. So the sweep now has two flowers, a flower path and a flower contour. I want this flower to look like there's more ice cream weighing down on one side. So I am placing it and scaling it so that it only comes out of one side and only a little bit. This looks okay, but of course we are going to need to edit it more later. For now, however, let's name it and bring it into the volume builder. Just so you know, not everything has to have the perfect name, especially when you are adding bits and pieces, as long as the name is descriptive enough and you can tell what it is later on. If you notice, adding this extra side did not automatically smooth it out. This is because the SDF smooth is underneath the extra side. So make sure to move it to be the upmost layer of the volume builder. Now let's add more irregularity to this ice cream by bending it. Take out a bend deformer and make it big enough to cover the entire ice cream.
We want the bend to affect the ice cream sweep, so let's bring it out of the volume builder for a minute and then make both the bend and the ice cream children of the null, because deformers can affect peers when they're both children of the same parent. In this case, the null is the parent. Now, that null, let's bring it back into the volume builder and, of course, make sure that it's in the correct order, meaning underneath the SDF smooth, and naming it correctly.
We want to bend this ice cream, so we can deactivate the volume builder for now and begin bending. Let's bend opposite to where we're adding the extra side so that all of the irregularity is not happening only on one side. And make sure that your bend has keeps length on, because we don't want the bend to change the size of the helix that we worked so hard to perfectly size.
Once you're done with the bend deformer, hide it from the viewport and make sure that you fix the position of the tip since it got left behind once the bend happened.
And now reactivate your volume builder. Once again, make sure that your layers in the volume builder are in the correct position. The SDF smooth should be the top layer. Once you're happy with it, let's bring this builder into a volume measure and name it ice cream. The next portion is going to be to recreate this little caramel bow. So let's hide our ice cream and cup and bring in this bow image to trace. This bow image is a PNG with a transparent background, which is something that you actually need to specify to Cinema so that you can see it. To do this, in your viewport attributes, you can change your alpha mode to normal, and this will recognize the transparent background. Again, to find the viewport attributes, you should go to Mode, View Settings, and the Back tab. Now, with our pen tool, let's trace this. I am creating a few different splines for different portions because we can't create this out of one spline since there's multiple starts and end.
So I'm going to create one closed spline for the center circle, and then I will continue to draw to create a second spline, which is going to contain all of the pieces of the top of the bow. After that, I will create a third spline that's going to contain all of the pieces on the bottom of the bow. You can have 3 splines the same way that I do, or you can have more than that, but the only thing is that your centerpiece should be one spline by itself because we're going to use a different generator for it. Okay, so now take out a circle spline and make it very, very small, and we're going to bring this into a sweep with your splines as the path. So here I actually made a mistake in the recording and I put all 3 splines as children of it, when in reality only spline point 1 and spline point 2 were going to be children of it, but later you'll see how I take them out. In the meantime, you do need to use the connect object to connect your splines since your sweep only recognizes an object A and an object B. So your splines, which are the path, should be connected as object B. Here's where I fix the mistake that I take out that spline, which is the center spline, which is a closed spline, and make it a child of an extrude generator as opposed to a child of the sweep. Decrease the offset, but make sure that it is big enough that it covers the width of the circle that you put as the contour for the sweep, right? You want those circles to be going into that center dot. And make sure that we're naming things correctly.
You might need to fix your splines like I had to fix mine, because regardless of the fact that this is meant to be a caramel bow and it's okay if it's a little bit messy, there is such a thing as just too messy.
So here I am smoothing out these splines using a combination of the Spline Smooth tool as well as going into the points themselves and fixing their tangent.
Let's add beveled edges to this sweep, and if you add quite enough, you should increase the segments so that it's smooth. Now let's bring this into a new volume builder and decrease the voxel size to 3 centimeters. We want this to look smooth since it's made out of caramel. So let's add an SDF smooth, and it looks like our bow disappeared. However, what actually happened was that the SDF smooth is smoothing too much. So if you reduce the strength of it, now you get a nice smooth bow. I increased the voxel size a little bit so that this would be a little softer.
Make this volume builder a child of a volume measure so that you can see the actual final geometry, and then just make sure that you're playing around with the settings of the volume builder until you get to something that you're happy with, right? So it could be smoother or less smooth than mine. I personally like when it looks like the caramel is connecting two of the splines, but perhaps you're not a fan of that. Do whatever you think looks good for you.
Let's bring our ice cream back and place our bow on our ice cream.
But first, let's make sure that we name our volume measure bow.
To get an even better placement, I want to bring a Spherify in to affect the bow. What the Spherify is going to do is that the bow is going to try to match the outside of a sphere, and we're going to use this to our advantage so that it tries to match that ice cream. Let's make our bow sweep a child of a null and bring in a Spherify. To get this Spherify to look right, we are going to need to adjust this for quite a little bit. Once again, your ice cream and your bow will not look exactly like mine, so this will require your own adjustments. Move the bow, move the Spherify, rotate the bow, change the Spherify strength, change the circle contour, alter the volume builder smoothness, etc. You can do quite a few things, and once you're happy with yours, we can move on to the next part.
Hide the Spherify in the viewport and name that null.
Hide your current work and let's create a little homemade pirouette. We are going to use primitive splines for this, so take out a cycloid spline and let's alter its attributes. Radius should be small, around 2.5 centimeters. The A radius should be around 15 centimeters. The start angle, I left it at -87 and I didn't change the end angle. However, if you want a different shape, these are your numbers, so feel free to change it to whatever you want. Now, let's bring out a rectangle spline, scale it down with the scale tool. The cycloid is the path, the rectangle is the contour. Put both of these into a sweep. Let's increase the height of our rectangle so that we have a longer stick. And make it a rounded rectangle so that it smooths out the edges.
Now let's slightly increase the end scale of the sweep so that we get this cool effect of the stick being offset. And before we're done with the sweep, let's make sure that we add bevels to the caps.
Make sure that you name it. Alright, now we just have to use our move tool and our rotate tool to position this on our ice cream.
Here, I wanted my ice cream to be a little bit smoother, so I went into the SDF Smooth filter in the volume builder of the ice cream, increase the iterations, which again is just how many times that filter is being applied, and then just decrease the strength a little bit. This was just because visually I wanted mine to look a little smoother, but again, yours could look slightly different and you can change the settings however you'd like.
This is looking good. The last thing that we're going to do is add the smiley face to it. We're actually going to add the smiley face out of geometry as opposed to out of a material, which is the way that it is in the file that I showed you. So I have this reference image with a lot of different smiley faces, and you are free to choose whichever one you like. I am going to use the one on the bottom right, so I'm going to center it by using the offset on the viewport attributes. The offset is the position of this image in relation to its center and Cinema 000. Move this until your smiley's center is around 000. Increase the transparency, and let's begin tracing our smiley face. Let's start with the eye. Since we want a semicircle, let's use our pen tool to create a point at the beginning and a point at the end. Align them using your scale tool. So select them both and scale them down in Y. And then, using our spline arc tool, let's create that perfect semicircle by clicking and dragging on the line. Now, using the pen tool, let's add the eyelashes and connect them to that object. So make sure that you have it selected on your Objects Manager. Let's give this some geometry using a sweep and a contour spline.
Make sure to size that circle accordingly so that the geometry matches the eyelash.
Now let's add some nice beveled edges to this object and make sure it has some segments to smooth it out. And make sure that your eyelashes are not going through your eye. Alright, now let's make a little blush using a sphere and an FFD. Scale down your sphere and fit it around the blush.
Take out an FFD deformer, make it a child of the sphere, and click on Fit to Parent.
Control A to select all points. Use your scale tool to squish it down.
So I made it shorter in Y, made it smaller in Z, but then made it bigger in X. Once you're done with that, make sure that you hide your FFD in the viewport. Now, the reason that I only created one eye is because I'm going to use a symmetry generator to be able to create the other eye and the other blush. So, naming them accordingly, I will group up that blush and the eye inside of a null, and then make the null a child of the symmetry object. Make sure that you check off Show Plane so that you don't have to see that red plane. And this now gets us 2 eyes and 2 blushes. So now we can move on to making the mouth,
which is going to be the exact same thing that we did for the eye. Point at the beginning, point at the end, arc tool, semicircle. I copied the eye sweep and replaced the path with the mouth path and named it accordingly.
And now let's group this sweep and the symmetry into a null, and let's call that null face.
Now let's place it on our ice cream. Your face is going to be too small, so let's increase the scale. We're going to do this in the face null by going to our coordinates and increasing the scale to 2 in all directions. This will make the smiley face 2 times bigger. The last thing that we need to do is to place this face correctly on our cup. First, I am changing the axis of the mouth so that I can rotate it from the right direction using Enable Axis and the Move tool. Make sure to turn off your Enable Axis after you're done using it. And now I am rotating it so that it matches the curvature of the cup.
Now I am going to go into the eye blush null, not the symmetry, and then change the axis there as well. So enable access, move the axis, and make sure you turn off enable access. Double check that you're doing this to the null itself, not the symmetry, because the null is responsible for the one eye and blush that we created, whereas the symmetry's axis is going to be responsible for both. So you're not going to get the same results when you try to rotate it. This is going to let me rotate this eye and blush from a better place, and now I can place that into the curvature of the cup. Play around with the face, make sure that you go back and play around with the ice cream, the bow, even the cup. The good thing about using our non-destructive modeling is that we can always go back and edit anything in real time. So take advantage of that and make sure that this ice cream is exactly what you want it to be.
And if you want to add extra details, feel free to. You can have different faces, add a little swirl to the pirouette, maybe add a wafer, a drop of ice cream on the floor, whatever you like.
Now let's add some materials to this ice cream. You can make this any color that you want, just make sure you have enough of a variation of different colors. Before we finalize the render, I want to bring in a backdrop so that this ice cream is not just floating in Cinema's default black. Then you're going to render it and you're done. Thank you for following along with this tutorial, and I'll see you for the next one.